But let's back up a little bit and take a look at ourselves. It's astonishing to look at our society and realize how it's fractionating, how families are broken. It was the first institution on the earth was the home in Genesis 2. And it's clear if you do any homework at all that our society has become incredibly dysfunctional. Our post-war generation, 80% grew up in a family with two biological parents who were married to each other. That was a very old-fashioned idea these days, but that's the way it was following World War II. Since 1980, less than 50% expect to spend their entire childhood in an intact family. And obviously I'm using research here that relates to the United States. I'm sure that you can't possibly be in the shambles that we are in the colonies. So an increasing number of children will experience family breakup 2 or even 3 times during childhood. Scientific evidence demonstrates that children in disrupted families do worse than those in intact families. They're 6 times more likely to be poor. They're 22% of one-parent families will experience poverty during childhood for 7 years or more versus 2% of children in two-parent families. It's the reality. Children of single-parent families are 3 times as likely to have emotional and behavioral problems, more likely to drop out of high school, get pregnant as teenagers, abuse drugs, and be in trouble with the law, and also higher risk for physical or sexual abuse. Less likely to be successful as adults, especially in love and in work. Harder time achieving intimacy in a relationship, forming a stable marriage, or even holding a steady job. That's the reality. Teen suicide rate has tripled. Juvenile crime has increased and become more violent. School performance has continued to decline. Welfare dependency tends to be passed on from one generation to the next. Daughters of single parents are 53% more likely to marry as teenagers, 111% more likely to have children as teenagers, 164% more likely to have premarital birth, and 92% more likely to dissolve their own marriages. Problem since the 1960s. After the Supreme Court outlawed mentioning God in schools, that was the big turning point, 62 and 63, taking Bible reading out of the schools, taking prayer out of the schools. And divorce was roughly 10 in 1,000, then sudden growth in 1979, using those numbers to more than double per 1,000, 23 per 1,000. In 74, divorce exceeds death as the leading cause of family breakup. In 1990, 1 out of 4 women had a child while unmarried. Half of all marriages now end in divorce. And by the way, that statistic is true of Christian families as well as secular families, which tells you that there is something fundamentally wrong. Remarried couples are more likely to break up than couples in first marriage. It's about 56% actually. 1 in 4 children will eventually enter a step family. And of course, Hollywood celebrates divorce and unwed motherhood. And federal policy celebrates social and sexual variances. We're going to get into some surprises on that in a minute. Fewer than half of all adult Americans today regard the idea of sacrifice for others as a positive moral value. The adult quest for freedom, independence, and choice in family relationships conflicts with a child's developmental needs for stability, constancy, harmony, and permanence in family life. Each divorce is the death of a small civilization. It inflicts wounds that will never heal. Survey after survey demonstrates that Americans are less inclined than they were a generation ago to value sexual fidelity, lifelong marriage, and parenthood as a worthwhile personal goals. It's a whole value system that's dysfunctional. You know, the scripture regards this as a prophetic sign. Matthew 24:12, the love of many will grow cold. And that word love, by the way, is agape. Many will grow cold. The most basic form in the family. Heterosexuals reproduce, homosexuals recruit. God's judgment as creator, we're going to talk about a bit here. Family serves as a seedbed for virtues. This is the first generation in the nation's history to do worse psychologically, socially, and economically than its parents. And of course, we have briefing packages on this, being faithful in a faithless world, and I encourage you to look at our expository commentaries, particularly of Ephesians and some others on this. Is your home a refuge or a battleground? Is the question. Don't need a raising of hands. There's a cycle that may startle you, but to think through here. You see, our government is now the purveyor of immorality. That may come as a shock. Why are we surprised? Governments have always loved crises. They provide a rationale for increased budgets and bureaucracies and subjugating the population. Crises do. In fact, most new dictators will create external crises in order to consolidate their internal powers. So military crises have always served that. The great discovery in America has been that they learned long ago that social crises serve just as well as military ones for the same ends. And there's one insight that may supply a key missing link. Immorality results in social crises. Is it any surprise to learn that governments have an enormous incentive to promote immorality? Let me diagram that for you. Governments have always enjoyed military crises because they increase budgets and provide excuses to increase power. In modern times, social crises work just as well as military ones, if not more. And they increase budgets, create bureaucracies, create departments that whatever problem they're there to solve is going to get bigger because that justifies the department, whatever segment you want to use. The thing to realize is that social crises are brought about by immorality. So why are we surprised that there's an incentive for governments that may be subversive, under the cover, or it might be quite overt, but in any case, they promote immorality. And that, of course, feeds on itself right around the way, because more immorality, more social crises, more budgets, and on it goes.